the Easter Bunny from the charity shop. People always say there are some second-hand things you should never bring home. Not because they are dirty, not because they are broken, but because before they ended up on a shelf, they belonged to someone else. They sat in someone else's bedroom. They were touched by someone else's hands. And sometimes, they carry something with them. This story was told by a young woman from a small town in England. She never wanted her real name shared. All she said was that it happened a few days before Easter, on a cold, rainy afternoon when she walked into a charity shop that had just reopened. The rain was light, but constant. The kind of rain that turns the whole street gray. The pavement was wet. The windows were foggy. The sky looked heavy and lifeless. She had just finished work and was walking home when she noticed a small shop between two old buildings. There was a handwritten sign outside. It said, "Open again, charity shop." She usually didn't go into places like that. But that day, for some reason, she stopped. Inside the window, she could see old clothes, books, porcelain dolls, picture frames, and boxes of things people had once owned, then given away. The place looked quiet, too quiet, almost like it wasn't waiting for customers. It was waiting for her. She pushed the door open. A small bell rang above her head. Inside, the air smelled like old wood, damp fabric, and paper that had been sitting too long. Behind the counter stood an elderly woman. She looked up and smiled, but the smile didn't make the room feel warmer. "Have a look around, love," the woman said. So the girl did. At first, everything seemed normal. Old sweaters, used books, a cracked tea set, children's toys, a row of porcelain dolls with glass eyes that seemed to stare straight ahead. Then she saw it. A white plush Easter bunny. It was sitting alone on a wooden shelf at the back of the shop. It wasn't especially cute. It looked old. Its white fur had faded into a dull cream color. Its long ears hung down. One black button eye reflected the light. The other eye looked slightly crooked, as if it had been sewn back on by hand. She didn't know why, but she couldn't stop looking at it. She picked it up. The second her fingers touched the fabric, she felt something cold run through her hand. Not normal cold. Not the kind of cold you feel from the weather. This was sharp and thin, like touching metal in the middle of winter. She laughed quietly to herself. It was just an old toy. That was all. From behind the counter, the elderly woman looked over. "You like that one?" The girl turned around. "How much is it?" The woman paused, only for a second, but long enough for the girl to notice. "You can have it," the woman said. The girl frowned. "For free?" The woman nodded. "It's been here long enough. That should have felt lucky, but it didn't." Something about the way the woman said it made the girl uncomfortable, so she joked, "Is there something wrong with it?" The old woman looked at the rabbit. Then she looked back at the girl. "No," she said softly. "People just don't keep it for very long." The girl felt a chill move up her spine, but she told herself the woman was just strange. Old people sometimes said strange things. Maybe it was just part of the Easter atmosphere. Maybe the rabbit had been sitting there for months and nobody wanted it. Maybe it was nothing. So she put the bunny into a paper bag, thanked the woman, and left the shop. Outside, the rain was still falling. She walked home along the empty street, carrying the paper bag in one hand. The houses on both sides were quiet. The windows were dark. And every few steps, she had the strange feeling that the bag was heavier than it should have been. Not like it had a stuffed animal inside. More like it had something real, something with weight. When she got home, she took off her red coat, hung up her hat, and pulled the rabbit from the bag. Her house was small. A narrow hallway, a living room, a kitchen, a staircase leading up to her bedroom, and a small backyard with an old wooden table where she sometimes drank tea. She carried the bunny upstairs and placed it on the bedside table beside a small crocheted sunflower her friend had made for her. The rabbit sat there, facing the bedroom door. It looked harmless, almost silly. She took a photo of it and sent it to her friend. The message said, "Look what I got from a charity shop. Free Easter bunny." Her friend replied almost immediately, "That thing looks creepy." The girl laughed and typed back, "It's secondhand. Of course it's creepy." Then she forgot about it until that night. After dinner, she went outside to the backyard with a cup of tea. The rain had stopped, but the air was still wet and cold. The wooden table was damp. The trees behind the fence moved slightly in the wind. Everything felt still, too still. She sat there for a few minutes, scrolling through her phone. Then she heard something inside the house. A small sound, knock, very soft, like something falling onto the floor. She looked up. Through the glass patio door, the inside of the house looked dark. She could see part of the living room and the hallway near the stairs. Nothing moved. She told herself it was probably the pipes or an old floorboard. She took another sip of tea. Then it happened again. Knock, this time louder. She slowly put the cup down and walked toward the glass door. At first, she only saw her own reflection, a young woman standing in a damp backyard at dusk. Then, behind that reflection, inside the dark hallway, she saw something white, small, standing at the bottom of the stairs. She blinked, and it was gone. She opened the door and stepped inside. The house was silent. She turned on the hallway light. Nothing was there. She checked the living room, the kitchen, then she went upstairs. The rabbit was still in her bedroom, still sitting on the bedside table, still facing the door. Its black eye looked straight at her. She stood there for a few seconds. Then she laughed. "I need to stop watching horror movies," she said to herself. She went back downstairs, locked the back door, closed the curtains, and turned on the TV. Later that night, she lay on the couch under a blanket, watching a show. The blue-purple glow from the TV mixed with the warm yellow light from the lamp. The room should have felt cozy, but it didn't. It felt watched. Around 11 o'clock, she was texting her friend again. Her friend asked, "Where's the bunny now?" The girl typed, "Upstairs." Her friend replied, "Don't let it watch you while you sleep." The girl smiled. But just then, the TV flickered, the picture distorted. The sound glitched for a few seconds. Then everything went back to normal. She sat up and looked at the remote. Probably the Wi-Fi. Probably nothing. Then she heard footsteps. Light footsteps. Coming from the stairs. Creak. Then another. Creak. She muted the TV. The room became silent. She stared toward the staircase. The top of the stairs was completely dark. She couldn't see anyone. But she had the feeling that someone was standing up there, looking down. She called out, "Hello?" No answer. Of course there was no answer. She lived alone. She picked up her phone, turned on the flashlight, and walked toward the stairs. Each step she took made the floorboards creak under her feet. She pointed the light upward. Nothing. She climbed the stairs. The hallway upstairs felt colder than usual. Her bedroom door was partly closed. She was sure she had left it open. Slowly, she pushed the door. The flashlight moved across the bed, the wardrobe, the wall. Then the bedside table. The rabbit was gone. The table was empty. The crocheted sunflower was still there. But the bunny had disappeared. She froze. For a moment, her mind tried to explain it. Maybe she had brought it downstairs and forgotten. Maybe it had fallen. Maybe her phone buzzed. A message from her friend. "Hey, that bunny looks kind of familiar. Send me a clearer picture of its face." The girl looked at the message, then back at the empty table. She checked the floor, under the bed, behind the curtains. Inside the wardrobe, nothing. Her heartbeat started to rise. She ran downstairs, and there it was. The white plush bunny was sitting on the small table beside the sofa, right next to the TV remote, in the exact room where she had been sitting all night. She stopped at the bottom of the stairs. The rabbit sat perfectly upright. Its ears hung down. One black eye reflected the purple TV light, as if it had been there the whole time. As if it had been watching her. This time she didn't laugh. She walked over, grabbed the rabbit, and immediately felt how cold it was. The fabric was freezing. Not like something that had been sitting in a warm living room. It felt like it had been outside. She shoved it into a plastic bag, tied the bag tightly, and threw it into the outdoor trash bin. Then she locked the back door, locked the front door, closed every curtain, and went upstairs. She barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she thought she heard something downstairs, a soft scraping sound. Fabric dragging across wood, something small being pulled across the floor. At one point, she heard tapping on the glass door in the backyard. Tap, tap, tap. Around 3 in the morning, she couldn't take it anymore. She turned on the bedside lamp and sat up. The bedroom was quiet. The door was closed. But underneath the door, in the thin strip of light from the hallway, she saw a small shadow. Something was sitting outside her room, low to the ground, still. She stopped breathing. The shadow didn't move. She grabbed her phone and almost called emergency services. Her hands were shaking so badly, the screen kept turning off. Then the shadow disappeared. No footsteps, no sound. It was just gone. She stayed awake until sunrise. When morning finally came, she opened the bedroom door. The hallway was empty. She went downstairs. The back door was still locked. The curtains were still closed. Everything seemed normal. Until she looked outside. The trash bin in the backyard was open. The plastic bag she had thrown the rabbit into was lying on the wet ground. It had been ripped apart, and it was empty. She didn't scream. She just stood there, staring at the torn bag, feeling something cold settle deep in her chest. No one had entered the yard. The fence was closed. The back door had been locked from the inside. So who opened the bin? And where was the rabbit? That morning, she decided to go back to the charity shop. She put on her coat, didn't even eat breakfast, and walked straight back to the street where she had found it. But when she got there, she stopped. The shop was closed. The "Open Again" sign was gone. The windows were dark. Dust covered the glass. Inside, she could still see old shelves and piles of second-hand items, but there was no light, no elderly woman, no sign that the shop had been open the day before. She knocked on the door. No one answered. A middle-aged man walking past noticed her and asked if she was looking for someone. She said, "I was here yesterday." The shop was open. An old woman was working inside. The man stared at her. "This shop has been closed since the beginning of the year." She thought she had misheard him. That's impossible. I came in yesterday. The man's expression changed. The old woman who ran it died a few months ago. The girl felt her throat go dry. The man told her that the shop had once been owned by an elderly woman who accepted donations from families in the area. But before it closed, strange things had started happening. And it all seemed to begin with a toy, a white Easter bunny. A family had donated it after their little daughter died in an accident. The child had loved that rabbit. She slept with it every night. After the funeral, the mother couldn't bear to see it in the bedroom anymore, so she gave it to the charity shop. But after the rabbit arrived, things inside the shop changed. Objects fell from shelves. The doorbell rang in the middle of the night. Security cameras caught the shape of a little girl standing in the shop after closing time. But when anyone checked, no one was there. A few people bought the rabbit and took it home. Every single one brought it back. Some after 1 day. Some after 2. They all said the same thing. The rabbit moved. They heard a child laughing in the house. And when they slept, the bunny appeared closer to the bed than it had been before. The elderly shop owner didn't believe them, until she started seeing the girl herself. A little girl in a white nightdress, standing at the back of the shop, holding the rabbit. Not long after that, the old woman had a heart attack inside the store. They found her behind the counter, and on the shelf at the back of the shop, the rabbit was sitting there. After that, the shop closed. No one wanted to clear it out. The girl opened her phone to show the man the photo she had taken, but the picture was gone. It wasn't in her gallery. It wasn't in her messages. Even the photo she had sent to her friend had disappeared. The only message left was, "Look what I got from a charity shop. Free Easter bunny." But there was no image. The man looked at her pale face. Then he asked quietly, "Did you take it home?" She didn't answer. She turned around and ran. All the way home, she could only think one thing. Where is it? When she reached her house, the front door was still locked. She opened it and stepped inside. The house was silent. Too silent. The living room was empty. The small table beside the sofa was empty. She checked the kitchen, the bathroom, the backyard. Nothing. Finally, she went upstairs. Each step creaked under her feet. Her bedroom door was slightly open. Inside, the room looked darker than it should have. She pushed the door open. The rabbit was sitting on her bed, right in the center, on her pillow, facing the door. Its long ears hung down. One black eye stared forward. The crooked eye seemed to look slightly past her. And beside it was the crocheted sunflower, the same sunflower that had been on the bedside table. She didn't remember moving it. She didn't remember touching it. This time, she didn't pick up the rabbit. She stepped backward, closed the bedroom door, and left the house. She called her friend and stayed with her for the next few nights. A family member later went into the house to collect some of her things. But when they checked the bedroom, the rabbit was gone. It wasn't on the bed. It wasn't under the bed. It wasn't in the trash. It wasn't in the yard. It had disappeared. A few weeks later, she moved out of that house, but the story didn't end there. About a month later, she received a message from an unknown number. There was no text at first, only a photo. It showed the old charity shop. The front door was closed. The windows were dusty. Inside, the room was dark. But at the back of the shop, on the old wooden shelf, something white was sitting there. The rabbit. Below the photo was one sentence. "Did you forget this?" She called the number immediately. It didn't connect. She texted back, no reply. The next day, she went to the shop with a friend. But when they arrived, The place had been cleared out. The windows were covered with newspaper. A "For Rent" sign hung on the door. The shelves were gone. The boxes were gone. There was no rabbit. No trace of anything. She asked people nearby if they had seen anyone enter the shop. No one had. And the strangest part was this. The photo disappeared from her phone a few hours later. Just like the first one, not deleted. Not in the trash folder. Just gone. After that, she never went into a charity shop alone again. She never bought second-hand toys. And she never touched old stuffed animals, especially rabbits. She said the worst part was not that the bunny moved. It wasn't the tapping at the glass door. It wasn't even the shadow outside her bedroom. The worst part was the way she felt when she looked into its eyes, because she didn't see a toy. She saw something waiting, quietly, patiently, like it knew that no matter how far she ran, no matter how many doors she locked, no matter how many times she threw it away, eventually, it would always find its way back. And even now, every year near Easter, she still gets calls from unknown numbers. No one speaks. There is only static. Then, very faintly, she hears the same sound. Soft fabric dragging across a wooden floor. Creak, creak, creak.